Let's focus on what we can accomplish when we really lock arm in arm. And let's stop letting the 5% and 10% that we disagree on dominate our psychology and our lives. And know that when we really lock arms in arms, we can do anything we want as a profession, as an industry, but more importantly, as a country.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Hartman. Well, my friends, today we have a little bit of a different episode. We're going to go in the way back machine, probably about 6 years ago, to this interview we had that featured two really smart, entertaining, engaging, and powerful individuals that are both in the Dallas area in the construction community. So back 6 years ago, we were really thinking about different ways to use podcasting. Podcasting, if you don't really think it's a thing now, that's fine. It certainly wasn't much of a thing 6 years ago. And this association that I've gotten a ton of value from, and I'm currently on the board now, it's called Texo. It's a combination of the ACG and ABC groups here in Dallas. And it's been wonderful for our business. And there's been so many talented people. And I'm thankful that I'm able to give back as I wrap up my third year on the board there. Anyway, the CEO there is a woman named Meloni Raney, and she is fantastic. And if we could find another several thousand people like her in our industry, this industry would be a hell of a lot better off than it is. And she's amazing. She's talented. She studied at the University of Oklahoma. Then she worked for a company called the Beck Group. And she ended up in the CEO role of one of the largest, most powerful associations in the country. We had this idea about doing a podcast specific to Texo. Long story short, that ended up being killed, which is a good thing because this podcast became what it is now. At that time, we were looking for some really interesting people to get some different opinions on that we have continued. And one of those was this individual named Mr. Fred Perpall. He was the chief executive officer at the Beck Group. He has a really unique background. He grew up in the Bahamas. On the episode we did with Rick Fox knows Fred very well. And Fred had recently, at that time, taken over the CEO role at the Beck Group, which is a design build firm. They build nationally, but they're based in Dallas. And because of his basketball roots and his connections, he ended up meeting Mike Krzyzewski at Duke and had really just started to grow in his career beyond the Beck Group. He's on the board of directors at FedEx, Starwood Property Trust, Triumph Bank Corp, and was really just making more and more connections. So we talked about his background, insights he had on leadership and management. And recently, in January of 2022, he was the president-elect of the USGA, the United States Golf Association. As you can imagine, he's obviously a very big golfer as well. So we had thought we had lost this footage, and we stumbled upon it. And in listening to it, I got motivated. I was inspired. And I said, okay, we're going to have to do a little bit of explaining because Meloni and I together are the co-hosts with Fred. But I think you're going to get a ton from this. And it's really powerful and motivational. So I'm excited to share it with you. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Meloni Raney of the Texo Association and Mr. Fred Perpall, CEO of the Beck Group and president of the USGA, United States Golf Association. As always, thank you for listening. What perception, or what do you think, what percentage of executives in the construction industry, design industry, listen to podcasts?
That'd be a hard one to determine. For me, I'm just a content junkie.
Okay.
I love information.
Yeah.
And so for me, I have to have multiple forms of consuming content. So reading, I've always been a vociferous reader. I read a lot. when I can't read, so if I'm driving somewhere and it's a 40-minute drive, I always think, instead of listening to ESPN over and over or listening to CNN or Fox over and over and having people bombard you with opinion, I always think, where can you find interesting content, things that are thought-provoking, that help you grow? And so podcasts for me have always been important, as are audiobooks, as are real books. The question is, how do you use your downtime and what's consuming your mental space? So I don't know what percentage does. I know here at Beck, we have a big percentage of our management team, 80, 90%. We read books together. We do a lot of learning together, and it might be in the form of audiobooks, podcasts, 15-minute video clips. I just showed our team on Thursday, we had an offsite. I showed them one of my favorite YouTube motivational speakers by this really aggressive hip hop pastor. And I said, and it was so entertaining. I'm sure our demographic, they're not listening to hip hop pastors, but this guy was so motivational. It was almost guttural, and you can almost see everyone's eyes lights up. So, the question is, how do you reach people and how do you motivate them? It's got to be sensory, and that doesn't always mean let's read a, Harvard Business Review case. Sometimes it's like, hey, let me show you a Ray Lewis video. And if this doesn't get you pumped up to finish the year strong, nothing will.
Right.
Have you seen that radiate down through the team?
Yeah, we've got a director of collaboration who sends out, like, every Monday morning, sends out a motivational video. And it could be anything. It could be Kobe Bryant scoring for 80 points, or LeBron James talking about leadership, or, the most abstract, he sent one out on a concert, someone thinking about how to, where do good symphonies come from, and, how do you play a role in an orchestra? And so, yeah, I think, particularly with our generation, multi-generations at work, you've got to find different ways to connect to everyone.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular source of inspiration that you come back to frequently?
I don't think, for me, it's not one thing. I try to draw on all my life's experience. I mean, growing up, I was an athletic junkie. I played 4 varsity sports in high school. And so I always tell people, I think the basis of my leadership is probably what I learned from being on good athletic teams. People play their role. They understand how to be successful in their own individual role. But more importantly, they understand how that role plays into the success of the overall team. To have good leaders, you need people who are capable of building trust, knowing that they will have your back proverbially by doing first what is required of them, but then secondly, thinking about how they can, help make the people around them successful. So my inspiration tends to be a lot of athletics. In fact, there's a big joke around here at Beck, not another metaphor. And one year in 2015, I said I would take a year off from athletic metaphors. So I was finding all these other things to do. I was talking about pruning roses and making a good salad, and people, finally my leadership team came back to me and said, that's just not authentic, man. Give us the athletic stuff. That, that's who you are. That's what it is. But think about it. One of the things I'm a big proponent of with young kids, including mine, playing team sports, is because you have to learn in team sports how to deal with multiple personalities, how to accept winning and losing, how to work hard, discipline, just a simple idea of playing volleyball like my daughter does. You got to pack your bag the night before, you've got to be prepared. You got to make sure your knee pads, your socks, your shoes, your sleeves, all of those things are set out and ready to go. Preparation, big part of success. Hard work, big part of success. Being happy for other people's success on a team, big part of competing, okay? Fighting through disappointment. So, my inspiration tends to come a lot from athletics, because in sports, winning and losing is very transparent and it's evident, and every day the scoreboard is reflected on, even in practice. And so, I tend to get a lot of inspiration from watching great athletes and being a part of teams and coaching some teams myself. But I would say that's probably the easiest place for me to draw inspiration.
So if you had to identify of the 4, called the 4 major sports, past or present, what coach do you most identify with or kind of aspire to be?
This is pretty easy. One of our biggest clients here at Beck and one of my biggest personal clients is Duke Athletics. And specifically, I've had the opportunity to work with Mike Krzyzewski. I was the architect of the Krzyzewski Center for Leadership Development, which is their basketball practice facility, but he really wanted to do something more than basketball practice. So in the practice facility is also the Academic Excellence Center. And I've had the opportunity over the last 10 years to work directly with him. So it's been very inspirational for me, but also, the idea that you could be around great leadership, and some of it you can't really describe. You just have to feel. And so working with him, hand to hand, and really becoming a really good friend, but also a mentor, he becoming one for me. It's been just really easy to watch, how he conducts himself first, but also the level of accountability and inspiration, the standards he sets for people around him, including his architects and builders. So it's been really easy to kind of to answer that question, being that I have such a close proximity to him.
That's fascinating. Melanie, if we go on the sports run, I think I'll just kind of ask every question.
You probably will.
I will.
And that's okay.
One question. We talked about the interest in going into some detail about succession planning, and I'm from Chicago, and my father went to college at Illinois State with Doug Collins, and so we always kind of watch Chris Collins.
I know Chris Collins very well, actually.
Fascinating to see how Coach K has been able to keep his stable of talent for assistant coaches. Wojo and Dawkins was there. Is Dawkins still there? He was there forever.
Yeah.
And just kind of your perspective on that, on kind of talent development, and how do you navigate keeping the best talent underneath, but at the same time knowing that you're grooming them for something more, but they're also really talented and probably have some other opportunities that they might be interested in pursuing on their own?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest measurement of leadership is the quantity of leaders you help create. And I have never seen someone being successful over a long period of time without thinking about a succession of leaders behind them. True leadership is really about other people. It's not about yourself. I mean, if leadership were just about you, right? if leadership is really about inspiring other people to follow. And so I think most leaders are in the business of creating other leaders. My opportunity to watch Coach K up close has been fascinating. First, it's an unbelievable standard he sets for himself. So when you think about Duke and what makes Duke great, you can't fake greatness. Maybe you can back end into one championship, and maybe you might, if you're lucky and you have the best players and recruit in a way, you might stumble into two. But you can't fake, 5 national championships, 3 gold medals, multiple, wins, over 1,000 wins, winningest basketball coach in the history of NCAA. You can't fake that. So where does it come from? Well, first, I think, my observation has been really high standards that he sets for himself, and that's in appearance. That's in how you treat people. That's in your willingness to listen. He's an unbelievable listener. But I think the people that do well in terms of succession are the people that sort of get those standards but are authentic to themselves. So in other words, I may believe the same things you believe, but I may not necessarily act the same way you act. For instance, it was interesting. I worked very closely with the program when Wojo and Collins were assistants. And you talk about how you cultivate leadership. Well, they really did all the things that you think head coaches would do. For instance, Wojo and Chris prepared every game plan, or most of them. And coach would sit down and critique them with them. But they did the game planning. They did the scouting. They did the recruiting. Even if you look at the halftime of most basketball games when Wojo and Chris were on staff, they did the halftime interview. So what was he doing there? Well, he was not only telling them what would be required of them as leaders in the future, but he was allowing them to participate in what would be required while they still had the benefit of his mentorship. And I would tell you, much of that is true for me in my experience at Beck. I've had a great mentor. I've had at least 4 wonderful mentors in the firm. And all of them have allowed me the opportunity to, similar as I described with Coach K, to not tell me about what would be required as a leader, but to really participate in leadership while I had the benefit of them still as safety nets in terms of mentoring. And so, it's been really fun for me to think, even as a 42-year-old CEO, to think, what am I doing to create more leaders, to inspire more people to want to lead? And first, to be passionate about the people around them, which is the basis of all good leadership.
How do you balance your schedule with, I'm sure there are so many people reaching out to you for asking for your mentorship and your guidance on things. How do you manage your schedule to give back and create those leaders?
Yeah. Well, I think first you have to be unbelievably honest, right? You have to say to people, listen, I have a certain bandwidth. I have a certain amount of time, and I'm not going to cheat you by making a commitment that I can't live up to. Secondly, I think, and this is probably true, you think about Coach K and you say, oh, well, he's got 8 head coaches come off his leadership tree. Well, he's probably had 800 players play for him. So while it looks like, oh, my goodness, he's got 8 NCAA Division I major, college head coaches, that's probably 1% to 2% of all the people that played for him. So you have to choose your spots. And what I'd say to young people is, what inspires mentors to want to mentor you is your own productivity, your receptiveness, your willingness to be mentored, your enthusiasm. But most importantly, what are you doing to amplify what is being given to you? See, I think for me, I was a good mentee, and I'm being a little biased here. But in that, what I would say is when I had mentors that were sowing into me, I would amplify back to them tenfold what they were giving to me. So if they say, hey, read this Gladwell book, I'd read every Gladwell book. And then I would come back to them with an email like, listen, I read Blink, and here's what I took away, and here's how this applies to our business. And in Blink, I saw some of you. And it's interesting that you would share this with me because I'm learning so much about where your ideas come from. And oh, by the way, in reading Blink, it was also recommended I should read this other book, What the Dog Saw. Have you read it? And here's what I take away from that. Amplification, amplification, amplification. Listen, so many people want all the benefits, but they don't want to do the work. And so when I talk to young people about mentorship, don't tell me that you want to be a mentee. Show me that. And that's going to be something very consistent that we probably will talk about, because I think it is really important, the enthusiasm for me. What attracts me to mentees are the people who are really taking what they're being given and giving it back in twofolds. Every mentee I've had, I've learned just as much from as they have learned from me or more. And I'd like to think that all my mentors, they may not want to admit this, is they've learned 1 or 2 things from me as well. That's the beauty of mentorship. It is never a one-way street.
With millennials coming in, and I do a little teaching at Purdue University in Oklahoma State, and looking at the salaries and kind of the supply and demand and the talent that's coming out, and we need them. As you look over the next 5 or 10 years, we know it's a cyclical industry. What are your thoughts on how we kind of temper the fact that we're not going to be able to sustain the starting levels where these folks are coming at, to where probably not going to be making $200,000, 4 years in? What are your thoughts on that, and kind of where the bar is being set right now by the market for what the top talent at universities are coming in at?
I think I'll be honest, I don't spend a lot of time on salary. It's something that is, I guess, required of all of us who run companies in terms of tracking our competitiveness. Money and salary is a byproduct of great work. And what I like to say to young people, all of us are going to have to make an investment. It's not only that the company makes an investment. In other words, you have to make an investment too. Maybe at the beginning you have to take a little bit less to have a more well-rounded experience. Maybe someone will pay you a little bit more, but they may stick you in a pigeonhole. And so what I try to think about for young people, do you have a good plan for your future? Do you have a good 5-year plan, 10-year plan? Not in terms of what you want to make, but what you want to do. And so many people who are short-sighted focus on what they want to make. Material things do not motivate people. Once you have taken care of the basic needs, I have a good apartment, I drive a nice car, I can pay my student loans, I can, take my girlfriend out to dinner or take my boyfriend out to dinner, I can fly home to see my family, The difference in that last $5,000 or that last $10,000 in the short term at the beginning of your career is meaningless in terms of as compared to the opportunities you receive. When I got out of college, I took the job that provided me the most opportunity. And when every step I moved up in Beck, I was focused more on opportunity. I went to Atlanta to lead our architecture practice, and I made a paltry sum of money. In fact, I always tease our HR people because I got a 5% raise above being a project designer to go be the director of architecture, 5% and a car allowance. Now, I had not had any business school yet. I had no negotiation skills, etc. I was so enthusiastic about the ability to be the first guy out of the mothership to go plant an architecture office. And in some ways, it was naive in that I didn't even think about what should I be compensated? What should they pay a director of architecture? What benefits should I be getting? I wasn't even I was so enthusiastic about the ability to be called the director of architecture and to express my leadership as a 29-year-old and to say, I've got some ideas of what a practice could be like and what an integrated firm could operate like. And now I get the opportunity to lead this. I was so caught up with the opportunity that I didn't even focus on the rewards. But here is the benefit of focusing on good work. When you do good work, the rewards come along. When you focus on being productive, the material things come along. And so I think we are in this very dichotomic time where even though we are at the top of the waves in terms of demand for what we do as architects, as builders, even though we need people in a way we've never needed them, the truly disciplined professionals will not focus on how much extra money can I wring out. They will focus on how much extra experience, how much extra opportunity can I wring out of this great time in our firms or in our industry's life. That's long-term thinking. And if you're 25, 30, 35 years old, it is your opportunities that ultimately determine your bandwidth. And it is your bandwidth that determines your success. So I would be focused not on salary, but on opportunity.
So on that note, you have a very unique perspective. Beck's an architecture construction company, and our industry, both of those industries, we just have a labor shortage like none other from both degreed professionals and skilled labor. So what personally do you think we need to be doing as an industry? Because the perception of our industry is way different than the reality. So what do we need to be doing to attract more individuals to our industry, both younger and then also in the current workforce, move them over to our industry?
Yeah, I think, listen, because we're in such a cyclical industry, we lose a lot of talent. People leave the industry in downturns and sometimes they never come back. And it's usually your most talented people leaving because they have the most opportunity based on their talent. So one of the things we think a lot about at Beck is how do we, resist the temptation to grow wildly in the up markets. So we limit how much we have to cut in the down market. So being very disciplined about what is sustainable and what is not. My first 3 years as CEO, I just wanted to grow. And so we grew fast. But now we've put a limitation on how much any business unit can grow. Because we realize that our constraint is not sales and our constraint is not opportunity for new work. Our constraint is actually growing our capacity and our people's capacity to lead and to manage. And there's only a certain amount of bandwidth you have as a company, as an industry, to onboard people successfully, to train them properly, and to give them great mentorship so that they can be successful. The other thing I think we have to do as an industry is we have not exposed our industry and our professions, both on the engineering, architecture, and construction side, enough to all of our citizens. Does a young kid in South Dallas understand what an architect does or what a crane operator does or what a foreman does? These are great professions, and people can have a lot of productivity for themselves and their families and their communities working within these professions. And ultimately, I think we have to do a better job of being more inclusive so that a kid who may be growing up in a disadvantaged situation today knows that, hey, if you really love working outdoors, or perhaps you love seeing things go up, or you always enjoy digging in the dirt, or you're really good with your hands, we need to attract more of those kids to our profession. And we need to have pathways where folks who are not necessarily going to go and get a 4-year or 6-year degree can get technical training so that they're capable and ready to be a part of our workforce and a part of our profession. So we need to have a binary track. We need to have a dual track. And I think it's something that I'm working very closely on through the Dallas Chamber, with Dallas Community College, the DCCD, to think about more technical education, more workforce readiness so that we are more inclusive.
So what is your story in a nutshell? How did you come to Dallas? How did you start at Beck?
That's a long.
In a nutshell.
I don't know if our listeners have enough time for that. It's a pretty long story. I mean, I got interested in architecture and construction at a very young age. My first job at 13, I was about 6'3". I was laying around the house, and my dad came home one day and said, "You're going to work with your Uncle Percy." My Uncle Percy was a mason and a block layer. And in the Bahamas, concrete blocks is the way most buildings are built. I grew up in the Bahamas. And so at 13, I started working on a construction site, and I did that job every summer. But I also always enjoyed drawing and sketching, and I'd sit in class and doodle all around. And so the combination of that creativity and the expressiveness, wanting to draw and sketch, and then always being fascinated with actually how buildings got built, those two things led me to architecture pretty early on. At 14 years old, I had already declared to my family I was going to be an architect and I was going to be a builder. And I wanted to build buildings and I wanted to design them. So it's funny when looking back at 42, folks say, well, you moved ahead in your career so fast, or, you got to where you got to so quick. Well, I always had a very specific idea of what I wanted to do. And once you know what you want to do, and the beautiful thing about knowing what you want to do at 14 is then you could wake up every day of your life and pursue that thing. And I never thought about doing anything else other than being an architect and being a builder since the age of 14. And it's been easy to wake up every day knowing that's what I want to do and I'm going to get better at that. And so I came to UTA at 18 to play basketball. I walked onto the team. I lasted a few weeks because playing college basketball was in direct conflict with being an architecture student. And it was very easy to give up basketball for architecture because I wanted to be an architect, and I declared that at 13. I think I was just savvy enough to understand that, hey, a walk-on at a small Division I school is not going to the NBA. So basketball is not going to feed me, but architecture could. Ironically, I got a much better scholarship to be a student than to be an athlete. At 21, I finished my master's degree and went to Rome for 3 months on a fellowship, came back, started to work for a small firm in Fort Worth, and then moved over to a small firm in Dallas, urban architecture, and Beck acquired us in 1999. That's how I got to Beck. And then all of a sudden it was pretty visceral because remember at 14, I said I always wanted to be an architect and I want to build buildings. And so now in 1999, I find myself in a situation where we are going to be designing things and then we're going to have the opportunity to watch those things be built. And so, just consistent with everything I had done as a young person, it was easy to show up at 23, 24, like, this is what I want to do. And how fortunate am I? Again, I'm telling you, Melanie, I might have been making $30,000. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I was underpaid. But it was not about the material success. Now, I must tell you, I have the luxury of being married to a very accomplished woman. So that probably gave me a little bit of an umbrella not to really be too focused on money. But when you're 23, 24 and your life dream falls into your lap, that the people you grew up with were really struggling and trying to find a way in life to just exist. And you get to show up at an office where literally your dream is coming true. It became very easy to work 18-hour days and to sleep under the desk and to do rendering after rendering and estimate after estimate because 13-year-old Fred said, this is what he wants to do. 24-year-old Fred found himself in a situation. Now, here's the thing about enthusiasm, passion, energy, commitment, love of people. Like, everyone wants more of that. So when people ask me about my life story, I said, hey, at 23, my dream fell into my lap. And I just continued to pursue that dream in a passionate manner, but also in a manner that says, I'm willing to work hard for this dream. See, everyone wants other people to make a commitment to them. They want the company to say, hey, I'm going to give you the salary before you do the work. I'm going to give you the title. Like, you can have the nice title, and then maybe you'll do the work that comes along with this title. I'm actually going to give you the promotion, and I'm going to call you all these nice things. And then maybe because I give you that position, you will show me that you can do that work. But true people who accomplish know that you first have to make a commitment to yourself. You have to look yourself in the mirror and say, this is what I want, and I am willing to pursue that. And when you get committed like that to yourself, people see that commitment.
I'm ready to charge the hill with you. I'm ready.
I'm in. It's Monday morning.
I'm ready.
We start off with basketball and sports.
I'm on my third cup of coffee, so I'm sorry. I get fired up about this stuff. But listen, if Beck, and I always tell people, if Beck took this position away from me tomorrow, I would still be me. Who I am is not based on the title I have. It's based on the work that I want to do. And I'll do this work for anyone, anywhere, because that's how fired up I am. If I had to go to Mexico in a small village and build huts for villagers, I'm going to be passionate about building things. Because what we do as a profession, this is what I want our listeners to understand. We're not just building buildings, man. We are actually building communities, spaces where people can improve their lives. It's not about building a hospital building. It's about allowing people to have a healthier life. It's not about just a new classroom building. It's about all of the new experiences those students can have based on the work we do. The work we do really changes lives. And if you woke up every day thinking that, oh, I'm not just slogging through estimates and RFIs and owner negotiated terms, but what I'm trying to do is leave this world, this community, this city, this neighborhood, this campus a little better than I found it. That when I come back here 30 years from now with my kids, I can say to them, you know, based on this project, more people experienced health. More people were enlightened. This company was able to live out its mission and take care of 4,000 families because we did good work. That's how I think about what we do.
I love the passion, and I appreciate it so much because I could not agree with you more. So how do you keep yourself energized? Is it natural just because of the passion? Do you fuel, or do you rest? Do you take downtime?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first off, I've never seen a leader be good for other people while not being good for themselves. And one of my favorite jokes I like to tell at Beck, you know, you get on an airplane, I have to get on airplanes weekly. You slide into your seat and the flight attendant comes with her or his instructions. He said, in a case of emergency, i.e. when stuff hits the fan, what do they say? Do they say, you jump out of your chair and start running around like a wild person, taking care of everyone else to the point of exhaustion where you would suffocate? No, they said, first put your mask on and then take care of those around you. That's what we all need to be about. That's that self-accountability, but also being accountable to yourself for having a balanced life. When we at Beck always complained about work-life balance, and I think it's a big thing in our industry. People work themselves to the bone. They say, you know, Fred, concrete's pouring at 3 a.m. and I got to be on this job. You ever heard this? If I'm not on this job, then stuff doesn't happen. If I'm not at the trailer, then things just don't get, we all have this superhero complex. But I like to tell our guys, if I drop down dead with a heart attack tomorrow, or if I won the lottery, or if I think Beck would still go on. We've been here 104 years without Fred. And I somehow I believe they would figure out a way to keep scratching out a living and keep the company going. So if the company can exist without me, what makes you think that job can't exist for 1 week without you? So accountability around yourself. So yes, I take a lot of time for myself to rest, to read, to rejuvenate, to be with my family. It is a commitment I've made to myself. Now, it doesn't mean I don't sacrifice. It doesn't mean I'm always in balance week by week. But when you're trying to lead more and do more, cannot achieve balance on a day-to-day basis or even on a week-to-week basis, depending on the caliber and the capacity of your leadership. So 1 week I may have to literally travel the whole week and miss everything with my kids. Or on any given day, I have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I may get home exhausted, kiss everyone goodnight, and collapse in my bed. And you can do that in a short term being 1 day or 1 week. But I think we have to hold ourselves accountable to having a more balanced life on month-to-month basis. So if I traveled like that for 1 week, I'm not traveling like that the next week because I have standards. Like I value me. I value my family. I want to be a good husband, not just a good CEO. I want my kids who are 10 and 12 to, when they're 18, you see, whatever we do to them now is what they'll do to us later. So when we blow them off, I can't make your events. When they're 24, they won't make our events. When you say to them, hey, being with you on Christmas Eve and singing carols and drinking hot cocoa and all that was not important to me. This is what I tell our people. You know, instead of saying, oh, I have work and I have commitments, just say to your family, instead of saying that, say this to them. My work is more important than you. Just say that instead, because that's what we're modeling. But when we do that to them, that's what they'll do to us. And so, yes, I try to live a very balanced life because leaders need to first be good for themselves. And oh, by the way, you want all those people who are coming up in your organization, in your industry, what you want them to say is, I want that life. You ever worked for someone, you looked at them and say, I don't want to be that.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
If your people are not aspiring to your life, then you need to look yourself in the mirror and say, what am I doing wrong? Like, I don't want to be chain smoking cigarettes, divorced, overweight, etc. No, I want to live a life of goodness. I'm not knocking people who are in that situation, but each of us need to first hold ourselves accountable to what we want and then hopefully spread that goodness to the people around us.
You've brought up reading a couple of times. If you had, you're going to buy every 19-year-old in the country one book to read, what would that book be?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
It would be. Okay.
Yeah. It's a basic book. I read it, and reread it.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I think given where we are as a country, the quality of the leaders we see in politics, the selfishness on both sides of the aisle, the me first mentality, it is very easy. Pop culture pushes this on us, whether in movies, entertainment, certainly in politics, sports. We see a lot of this me first. And when you are leading, you might be leading a project, you know, the whole world is pushing onto you, me first. Even right now, if we're not careful, I'm sitting now as a CEO of a company and say, oh, yeah, all of this here is about me. No, it's not about me. I just happen to be privileged, you know, to be the captain of this ship for this period of time. Remember, I said Beck's been here 104 years, and it'll probably be here 104 years after me. So we all have this moment in time. I like to give that book to folks because it really causes you to think. If you want influence, you have to first be passionate about other people. People want to follow those who are committed to their success, not to your success. You get what I'm saying? And so it's my favorite book. I have my daughters reading it at 10 and 12.
That's cool. Well, part of Dr. Heather Yates at Oklahoma State, part of their capstone course is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Part of it. And I thought it was brilliant. Yeah.
Hey, the most sophisticated things in life are the simplest things in life.
Amen to that.
I'm going to say that again. All of us suffer from what I call a complexity bias. That somehow to show people I'm really intelligent, I have to make things very complicated. But true genius is in simplicity. That's why I like that book. You know, when you get home every day, I don't know if do you have a dog?
I do not have a dog.
Do you have a dog
by proxy?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you the reason why dog's man's best friend. My dog certainly love him. Okay.
What's his name?
Mies. after the architect. But when I open my back door, depending on how I've behaved that day or week,
That's awesome.
My kids may or may not greet me enthusiastically. Wife may or may not greet me enthusiastically. But every time I open my back door and walk into my house, Misa's going to be there with enthusiasm. And I love him a lot, mostly because he loves me. And if we were to think, why am I not getting this kind of impact at work? Why is this client treating me this way? Why are the people around me not enthusiastic about my leadership or about the things I'm trying to get them to do? If we first look in the mirror, it's probably because we are emitting a me first attitude. When we emit a you first attitude, most decent people will reciprocate that.
I think we could call this a Mies first attitude. Is that a little too much for Monday morning?
I think that's awesome.
Is that too much?
I think we could.
Listen, I don't want to get too serious about this, but listen, the DNA and the authenticity, everyone has to have their own things. I'm sharing with the audience my things. But I think if everyone would just reflect on their life experience, the things that motivate them, and just should be more intentional about it. Like what is your why? Like, Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start with the Why.
Yeah.
I love the book, and I would encourage all of the audience to go click on the YouTube video of Sinek explaining the why. But most people start off with the what. And even us, we talked about how do we address salaries in the industry? That's a what. What do I want? What do I want to live? That's what's. But most sustained success starts with a why. So why are you even in this industry? Why do you show up at work every day? If you start to think that way and just really reflect on what 14-year-old you would say about what 40-year-old you. And I think too few of us start with a why. And for me, that's always been something intuitive because I really grew up in tough situations, right? I walked over people who were drug abusers to get to school. I had people I went to high school with murdered in high school. I had a brother who was murdered. For me, the why was always easy. And so all of us have something that motivates us, something that is guttural. It doesn't need to be explained to us at work. Like the person at work shouldn't be motivating you. Like you have a why that you need to reflect on. And then if you're courageous, you might share that why with some people that you love and that you care for. But even if you don't want to do that, if it's deeply personal to you, try to reflect on that every morning. We live in the best country in the world. We work in a wonderful city, right? Like few cities are as energetic and futuristic as Dallas, Texas. I mean, just look at the demographics. People are moving here. People are voting with their feet. I want more of that. We work in an industry that literally can change the impact people's lives. It can physically make the environment we live and work and play in better. And if you can't get excited about that, then you might need to find something else to do, brother.
Well, being a recent transplant, 6 months ago, moved from Chicago down here, and I'm like,
he's an example.
Yep, that is.
No overcoats. You could sell all those winter coats, or most of them.
Yeah, I was saying putting on lights yesterday in my house in 70-degree weather was just awesome. But we're respectful of your time. We just got a couple kind of quick questions here, kind of at the end here. You want to lead us off?
What's your favorite word?
That's a tough one. I would have to tell you, I don't have a favorite word. I mean, anyone that knows me knows, I always get accused of being a little too loquacious. I love a lot of words.
That's why I thought it was a perfect question for you.
Of recently, it's probably been why.
Okay.
We've got this little thing at Beck called the 5 whys. We stole it from lean principles where you got to answer 5 whys. So I like why, why are you here?
What consumer brands are you most loyal to and why?
I'm a big Apple guy. By measure, I was the first or second person at Beck to have a Mac computer. I think I asked for that at my employee review time. While we're talking about bonus, a Mac would really make my life better. At the time, I was doing a lot of presentations. I was one of the first people with an iPhone when they came out. I was one of the 4 people at Beck that got to beta test one. Turns out I have a buddy who is a top executive at Apple now, but even before I knew him, I was very loyal to Apple because it goes back to what I said earlier. Simplicity is the highest form of elegance. And I think they make very elegant products that you don't need an instruction manual to use most Mac products. And you think about how good life would be as if everything was that intuitive.
So if you weren't an architect and a builder, what profession would you attempt? What would the 12-year-old boy say?
You know, I always thought that I would probably be a history teacher because I love history and I love, you know, the kind of stories that go along with history. And I might still do that one day, you know. That probably would be the most, you know, some sort of anthropological, historical kind of profession would probably be what I would have chosen.
What question do you wish was asked more frequently at Beck?
You know, I wish our folks would spend more time with our customers' why. Our business is really a business of what and how. You know, so a customer comes to you or even a colleague comes to you, we need to do this. And it's always described in what. Mm-hmm. But we don't pierce back behind that what to ask why and what are the factors driving this decision. And I wish we would be more curious in that way. Okay. I wish we would also seek to understand more than to be understood. And most people are speaking one directional. And frankly, for me as a leader, it's probably one of my biggest opportunities for growth, you know, to be more questioning, to be more curious, to be interested in other people, not just interesting to people. Those are the things that I think we as an industry, but we as a company, we're really working on.
I can tell Melanie and I've talked about this is forcing yourself and 2 people who are fairly comfortable talking, putting yourself in an interview situation, forcing yourself to ask good questions and listen and to play off that is like a whole set of like, I think, personal benefits that I've gotten. But if you had to shoot 100 free throws tomorrow, what do you think you'd shoot? And there's, outside of being an oddball question, there's actually a reason for it.
So I would first of all, I'd tell you that at 38, about 3.5 years ago, I gave up basketball completely. I haven't shot a basketball. Well, you know, I'm kidding. I was at one of our universities and shot with the team about 2 months ago. But, you know, in high school, I probably was a 71% free throw shooter. Okay. I've never shot a better percentage than that. So I would like to think that I might be like 1 or 2 percentage points off. but I was not a good free throw shooter, mostly because I just had a low attention span in high school. Like I wanted to hit someone. I wanted to play. I didn't want to just stand and shoot free throws. So Graylin Franks said that in high school he shot like 98%. So I kind of challenged him to like a free throw contest for charity that we're gonna set up sometime. See, Graylin's probably not that exciting of a player, so probably shooting free throws was one of the more exciting things he got to do. You know, I actually got to score in the paint. You know, so I didn't have to rely on free throw shooting to get good numbers.
I am curious what the 4 sports were, the varsity sports in high school.
Yeah, so I was the captain of our high school track team. That probably the best sport for me in high school was track. I was on our junior national team twice. I ran the 200 and 400 meters.
Wow.
Okay.
Ironically, the best sprinter in the world today is a 6'6" man from the Caribbean. I might have been, ahead of my time. Could have been me.
Could have been you.
But I was a darn good 400-meter runner. It's just distance, stride. When you're 6'6" and you're running against 5'10" and you're running 400 meters, you got a baked-in advantage. Yeah. I was a captain of our basketball team. Coming out of high school, I had basketball scholarships and track scholarships. Those were my 2 best sports. I played volleyball, and I was a varsity volleyball player, but I didn't focus on it as much. But I started on my high school volleyball team, and then I played. And don't laugh at this, but in the Bahamas, we don't play baseball; we play softball, men's softball.
12-inch or 16-inch?
We play 16. No, we play softball, fast pitch softball. And so I was on our softball team, and I played in the least likely place people would hit, which was right field. they hid me mostly because they wanted my speed on the base. I was not a extraordinary softball player, but in the other three sports I started, and in two of the three I was the captain of the team. So
That's wild.
Ironically, in high school, it's funny. I'm getting the opportunity to go back and be the commencement speaker of the high school I graduated from. I graduated high school in 1990, and I've had the opportunity to be the commencement speaker at UTA. And so now this is this sort of the I guess College of the Bahamas, the three institutions I went to. So if someone's from the College of the Bahamas is listening to this, they need to invite me because I'm very interested in capping off all of my alma maters with a commencement speech. But
that's our audience. We have them included in this. So
the basis of my speech will be: do not let your life peak in high school. So it's interesting that we're talking about what we did in high school, but there are some people whose life literally was as good as it was going to be in high school, and we don't want to live life that way. But I will tell you about playing all those sports and going from one sport to the next. In each case, it was almost entirely a different team. In other words, most of the softball players did not play basketball. Most of the basketball players didn't play volleyball. And so I had the opportunity to go from team to team, which made me a very popular person amongst the athletes and amongst most of the students. But each of those sports required different team competencies, not skill competencies. In other words, in basketball, two good players could literally win games, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're in the NBA and you have three all-stars, you are always in the hunt for a championship.
Yeah.
But if you're playing volleyball, two good players cannot win a game. And actually, it comes down typically to who is your eighth or ninth best player, right? The team with the best two worst players, if that makes sense, is going to win a lot. Whereas in basketball, the team with the two best players are going to win a lot. So oftentimes at work, we don't actually do these team competencies. We treat everything like it's basketball, like the two best players, I'm the best guy. In fact, most companies are more like volleyball. How good are our worst players?
Right.
And what are we doing to breathe life into getting them better? Because a lot of our winning and losing is going to come down to how good is everyone, not how good is the best two.
Yeah. Did you listen to Malcolm Gladwell's podcast called Revisionist History?
I do. I love that.
I'm not sure if it was there, but I want to say Gladwell kind of wrote something that I didn't realize about, but it was about kind of soccer or football it was that principle.
Yeah.
And a lot of the big teams were thinking it's more like the NBA where you pay a ton to a couple guys.
Yeah.
And then you had Leicester City winning, which was all a bunch of also-rans.
Yeah.
And it was about a team. But anyway.
San Antonio Spurs is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Tim Duncan obviously was one of the best players, but they never had the best players. But they beat LeBron, they beat Kobe, they beat the best players all the time. Dallas Mavericks, another good example of that. Dirk Nowitzki, very good, but wasn't one of the top 10 players in the league. Won championships. So I think a lot of the world, particularly in architecture, construction environment, very much like the volleyball team, everyone has to be good for us to win.
The strength of the weakest player is a lot more important than the talent.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're probably wrapping up our time, but is there any final thoughts you have that you want to spread to our listeners? I just would encourage everyone, particularly as we get to the end of the year, to reflect on how fortunate we are as a country. I mean, I don't think that our political rhetoric really represents, the opportunity in this country. I was fortunate enough to get to Texas as soon as I could at 17. I grew up in another country. I grew up in a very, tough neighborhood in a poorer country. And I think what always fascinates me is how wonderful this country is, how much opportunities we have, with each other, how close we all are ideologically, and how good we can be when we all together. And I always reflect on these things, being, an African American who lives in a very broad culture, and how well received I have been, how well received my family's been, how if you and I sat down, how our life experience would be 95% matched and 5% difference. And what I would like to say to our audience, and this is bigger than just architects and builders getting along, but let's focus on the 95% we believe in together. Let's focus on what we can accomplish when we really lock arm in arm.
And let's stop letting the 5% and 10% that we disagree on dominate our psychology and our lives. And know that when we really lock arms in arms, we can do anything we want as a profession, as an industry, but more importantly, as a country. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Well
Appreciate
said.
it.
Thanks, Fred.
All right, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Meloni Raney and Mr. Fred Perpall. I know in the intro I had to give a little bit more clarification than I normally do about how that whole thing was structured, but I think it really speaks to some of the timeless aspects of leadership and management and how you build really strong teams that this conversation could have existed 6 years ago and never saw the light of day. So I was excited to bring it back. And congratulations both to Fred and Meloni on both of their success. The odds of us basically making this happen today would be zero. Like both of them are too big time for me. So if you enjoyed this, as always, please leave a review. Those mean more to us than you know. We read every piece of feedback we get, good, bad, or otherwise, as we try to make this show better, to bring you more value. And we really respect the fact that you are giving us your time and attention, and I want it to be as impactful as possible. So if you have feedback for us, good, bad, or otherwise, it's info@BradleyHartmanandCo.com. There's 2 N's in Hartman. So info@BradleyHartmanandCo.com. We read every single one that comes in. So my friends, that's all I've got. Thanks for listening. I want you to have a great week. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first.